Hi guys, and welcome to the webinar, How to Make Corporate CRM Work for You. We're going to be covering some basic features of our product, mostly aimed at the end user audience. So we're going to be looking at some of the most used functionalities of the site and some things that will hopefully make life easier for your end users. And if you're an end user yourself, help you get used to and start working with the system quicker and easier. So before we get too deeply into it, I would like to cover a couple of keywords, some specific terminology that I'll be using to talk about our product. That specific terminology, to kind of make it, it's not going to be too much. I don't want to overload you guys, but we do have a few specific terms. So I'll start with you're going to be hearing me mention things like columns. You're going to be hearing me mentioning things like lookups. A column is just a field into which you enter some information. A lookup is also a field that is either a drop-down menu or pops up on the screen and lets you make a couple of choices. And we'll be looking at examples of this as I'm going through this webinar. You're also going to hear me mention a lot about sections and records. Sections are just the various different parts of the site that we have available for access, while records are the specific records in the sections itself. And all of this will make a little more sense once I get into it. So with that in mind, let's get started. So when you guys first log in, what you're going to see here is the welcome screen or the welcome page. And you guys can immediately see that we have a couple of things immediately to access. We have a list under General of all of the shared sections in our system. So when I say shared sections, if, for example, you have one of our bundled products instead of simply either sales or marketing or service, but a bundle of all three, then these shared sections will be the same and present in all of the different products. Underneath the shared sections, we then have a list of all of the product-specific sections. So as you guys can see in sales, I have things like opportunities, orders, contracts, which aren't necessarily present in either the marketing or the service. We also have access to our analytics dashboards, which I'll be talking a bit more about, but to give you guys a sense of what they are things like pie charts, flow graphs, counts, and indicators, things that'll help you put specific concrete numbers to your performances and to your work and business processes. Now, with that out of the way, I also want to mention you guys can see that I have my admin area up, though for an end user, I wouldn't worry about too much. You guys do have a profile, but that's also not something I'm going to go too heavily into at the moment. Before I totally leave our welcome page, I also want to mention that we do have immediate links to both our Academy, which contains all of the documentation on our system, along with things like recorded webinars, future trainings, testing and certifications, and other helpful features to get you more familiar with the system itself. We also have a direct link to our community, which will let you pose questions not only to us at BPM Online, but also to other BPM Online users, and lets you pool information together, maybe to find answers quicker than you otherwise would on your own. And of course, we also have links to the mobile versions of our products that you can download from any of the associated web stores. Now, before we leave this screen entirely, I also want to mention that we have what we call a command line up here. Looks like a search bar, which lets us do a couple of quick things. Like, for example, search in any of the given sections. So in this case, contacts. I can also add records directly to any given sections. For example, add a contact if I wanted to. And of course, I could also set up some custom commands, but I'll be covering that a little later once we go through a bit deeper into the system. Now, hopefully that'll give you guys enough information to familiarize with the basic screens, and I also wanted to mention the section pane we've got present on the left-hand side. Now, our section pane also lets us, as you guys can see, scroll through all of the different sections in a product. We can switch between the multiple products, and one of the things I also wanted to mention is you guys can actually talk to your CRM coordinators or your system administrators about is the possibility of having your own workspaces set up based on your roles. So I wouldn't worry about how to set all that up, but just know that as you guys can see, we've got a couple of support lines, we have marketing and sales, but you can also talk to your sysadmins or your CRM coordinators to set up specific workplaces based on your roles and not just the ones we have present out of the box. We can also add records to any of our sections directly from the section pane itself. We can run business processes, and of course from the main menu, we can go once again to any of our workplaces, run the process, switch to any of our products, and access our profile. So before I go on, I wanted to pause for a second, see if anyone had any quick questions about the initial workspace and welcome page. And I'll continue in just a moment. I see we actually already do have a question. Someone was asking about the system designer link that you guys see in the welcome page. They were asking if all the users have access to the system designer. Well, the system designer, first to give you a bit more information about it, is actually where we keep all of our different system settings. However, while all users do have access to the system designer, that does not mean that they will be able to just go in and edit things willy-nilly. So people who will be able to actually choose different settings and set different things up, that is completely dependent on the access rights that they'll have. Okay, that looks like it's it for questions. Let's go ahead and now take a look at one of our most used sections, probably the section that almost everyone's going to be using at some point in their CRM using life, and that is going to be accounts. Now, what are accounts? Accounts are specific organizations that you do business with or you have some sort of relationship with. Accounts can be things like companies, NGOs, government bodies, and so on. But they aren't just specific people. For that, we use contacts. But before I go too deeply into contacts, let me cover a little bit more about our accounts. As you guys can see, we already have a bunch of information showing about these accounts, and we call this kind of view where every single record has its own separate section a tile view. And while this is informative, it might take a bit more space than you'd like, or maybe you just don't like staring and scrolling through a huge list of separate sections. Well, luckily for you guys, we do have a pretty easy way to change that. And we can do that simply by hitting the View button and hitting Select Fields Display. Now, you'll notice that we also have something called a section wizard. And this will be more for your sysadmins and CRM coordinators to use, but the section wizard will let you add different types of fields, different types of columns and lookups, and so on. Though for you guys, I wouldn't, especially for end users, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I also wanted to mention that, like the system designer, the section wizard might not be editable for everyone. It will, of course, depend on the access rights that any given user has. We can also, of course, sort either by name, web, or any of the fields present on our section page. And we can set up various summaries. I don't tell you a little about the various summaries we can set up. First, let's say I just want to get rid of this tile view, and I want to switch it to something that I feel is a bit more friendly. So once again, I just hit View and select Fields Display, and I can just go ahead and switch to the list view. And the list view will look more or less like your typical Excel spreadsheet with column names at the top and then listings underneath. And one of the things I want to mention is when you switch, or when an end user switches through these various views for him or herself, that does not mean that every other user will also see it that way. All of these view settings are personally set up. Now, there is an exception. If your system administrator has set up a certain view and you have not customized your view yet, we customize view like I just showed by going into our select fields to display and selecting some different options. If you have not done that, let's say you're an end user, you're logging in for the first time, but your system administrator or your CRM coordinator has already set up some views, then you will see those views until you customize your view. So if you customize anything, that'll override whatever default views your sysadmins have set up for you. So just be aware of that. Of course, if you do customize your view in some way, and then you want to go back to default, we can do that pretty simply by just hitting the little portrait of ourself and going into our own profile. And from here, obviously, we can change our password, we can choose a date and time format, a time zone, all the typical profile things you would expect. But also, and pretty importantly, we can hit the Restore Default Settings button to clear out all of the custom views that we might have set up for ourselves. Now, we not only can switch through the tile and list views from the section page, we can actually add additional fields that we want to see. So, for example, I can see the name, the address, the primary phone number, and so on of this particular account. But let's say I want to see their category. And I can just do that by hitting the plus sign, then scrolling through the list of fields that I have available to me, selecting one of them, and pressing the select button. After which, if I want to make sure that my view doesn't look too cluttered, I can then make fields smaller or wider using the arrows here at the bottom. And we actually get a handy little tooltip that pops up telling us that these arrows represent the column width. And we can just expand them and drag and drop them into the blocks that we want in order to get the perfect view that works best for us. We can, of course, also delete certain fields from here just by hitting the delete button. And of course, going over to list view works the exact same way. Once again, we can just make fields smaller, though one of the differences in the list view versus the tile view is that the list view will have everything lined up at the top of the section page, meaning if you want to add additional details, then you have to make your fields small enough in order to see the plus button. I see we have a question. Okay, my colleague will go ahead and answer that for you shortly, so let's go ahead and keep moving on here. So as I said, the list view, we can add columns, though, once again, to remind you guys, we do have to make this column small enough in order for this little plus button to pop up. Once it does, then we can go ahead and choose whatever additional column we need to. And by hitting save, it'll pop up for us right here in our list view. And also in the list view, unlike the tile view, we can sort immediately by any of the columns present at the top in the header section. I also wanted to mention our summaries, though for that, I'm going to take a look at our other section, Invoices, which also as an end user you may be experiencing quite often, especially if you're going to be working on the sales side of things. And since we're looking at the sales product, I think it's only right to take a look at our invoices. Of course, an invoice, I think that at least should be pretty obvious. It is an invoice, something that is charged for a particular order. Now, we do have a nice clean process that generates these invoices automatically from orders. But before I show you our inbuilt corporate sales process, I did want to show you the Set Up Summaries button. This allows us to do a couple of things. Of course, the first thing, which I always recommend everyone to set up, is to be able to display the number of records we can have in a particular section. So this will give us the amount of invoices we have open. And by hitting the New button, we can choose a column that we want some kind of summary for. Very often you might want to know something like how much how much total have we sold, for example, and we can use that, various options here, either the amount without taxes, the amount without taxes in whatever the base currency is. We can also get a summary of how much has been paid. For example, if we know that our invoices should total a certain amount, and we want to compare and make sure that the payment amount matches that. But for now, let's just go ahead and select our amount and hit save. And we can see that right up here, it'll tell us the total amount of invoices we have and the total amount of records that we have in our invoice section. Now, before we totally leave our little view button here, we can also switch over to our dashboards from the view menu as well as from this button at the top here. Either way, it'll take us to the same invoice section that we like, where we have our analytics and our dashboards. And I'll go into how we can kind of change some of these dashboards, but you guys can see that we have a lot of pretty basic and useful analytics already set up for all of you. The most important part, of course, is going to be the drill downs, or how we can go deeper into some of our analytics and really dig into the data. But I'll get to that in a moment. Before we go too deeply into our dashboards, I do want to show you a couple of other pretty handy functions from that we can access directly from our section screens. The first thing, obviously, are all of these buttons up here. What do they do? What are they for? Well, most of these buttons up here serve some kind of filtration function. They help us sort through the possibly massive amounts of data that we can have. Even as we can see in my invoice section where I am at 60, that's already working to the point where, well, just scrolling up and down won't cut it. I need some way to sort through all of these different invoices to find exactly the ones that fit my criteria. And we can do that a couple of ways. First off, we can set date filters in the section that are available. Things like in invoices and activities, we will have these kind of date fields that will let us choose either today's date by clicking on the 1 button, this week's date by clicking on the 7 button, and of course we do get tooltips that'll pop up and show you what these buttons are for. And we can also switch through different additional date choices from the checkmark button. So, for example, I can look for all the invoices that were created yesterday. I can look at all the invoices for today, tomorrow, and so on. I can also choose custom. Sorry, I see we have a question. Give me one moment. Okay, and you can also go ahead and switch through the various different date functions and choose your specific dates that you want to see from our little calendar right here. We can clear them by hitting the X button, and it'll even tell us, well, remove this particular filter. Next up, we have our owner filter. An owner is another kind of specific terminology that we use in our particular system that signifies the person responsible. So in the case of invoice, it is the person responsible for any given invoice, the person who is responsible for making sure it's paid, making sure the record is accurate, and so on and so forth. You can go ahead and choose yourself, of course. You will always appear as the first owner. So if I click John Best, it pops up. I can hit the X and clear it. I can also look at other owners in the system by hitting the Add Owner button. And that'll bring up other employees that have ownership of a given invoice. And I have a bunch of other filtration options. Though I would also like to show you the tag options, which lets us search through any tagged records we have. We don't have any tags at the moment, but let's go ahead and add a tag so we can immediately start segmenting some of these invoices. Let me go ahead and open one of our invoice records. And if it looks intimidating, don't worry. It's all actually pretty straightforward. To kind of give you a look, I'm going to hit the little tag button, and it'll give me an option to enter a tag name. And if I start typing in a tag name, I can either add a private tag, a corporate tag, or a public tag. The public tag is available for everyone to sort by, including, of course, the portal users that you may have if you have the service product. On the other hand, the corporate tag will be available for any users of the system to access, while the private tag will be available only for your own access. So let's just go ahead and add a new corporate tag, and we can see that this record at least has already shown up as tagged under finance. And then if I just hit the tag button and type in finance, you can see the tag pops up. I can click it and immediately find the records that are tagged for me. And of course, this is useful for you in order to maybe set up some private tabs for yourself as a way of immediately being able to access all of your stuff. But that's not the only way you can see what belongs to you. Like I said, we do have the owner screen, and we can also simply add filters. And our filter is our main search function. So we can search by almost any field that we have present in the record itself, and then simply type it in. So for invoices, it may be you may want to filter by things like numbers, by accounts, maybe even by contacts or dates. And then by typing in the chosen column field here, we can see everything that pops up. We can also, of course, see folders, and I'll go into folders. Before I do, I want to talk a little about advanced fields, or advanced filters. Advanced filters are very similar to our usual filters, except we can drill down a little into the data. So let's say we want to find all of our invoices that are unpaid, right? So we can do that, of course, through our typical filter and then choose a date, or we could go to our payment status. So if I choose this column payment status, it'll let me then choose a couple of options from here. So things like unpaid, partially paid. Let's say I want to see all of our invoices that are partially paid. Now let's say I also want to, so one of the additional functionalities of our advanced filter is then we can add multiple conditions to filter by. So let's say not only do I want to see partially paid and unpaid invoices, I want to see partially paid and unpaid invoices for a specific account. In this case, let's say I want to see everything that has to do with Alpha Business. In that case, I can just, again, add my account, and then from here, I can type in Alpha Business, and it pops up first thing. Then I hit apply, it'll pop up with all the partially paid and unpaid invoices for Alpha Business. As you guys can see, this is a pretty easy and straightforward system. So no longer do you have to dig through your data and sort and really worry. You can just put in very simple conditions to find exactly the data you want with a minimal amount of effort. So now that we've covered our advanced filter, and actually we can see that even though I've closed the advanced filter page, this advanced filter still exists in our little filtration bar right at the top. And the reason I want to show you the advanced filters before the folders is because our folders are ways that we save our advanced filters. We can see that we already have a couple of default advanced filters or folders set up, and we even have one in favorites. We can make a folder favorite just by clicking the star, and that'll let us add to favorite. What that means is from all of our folders, we can always have access to them without really having to worry. We can see that I don't have to show my folders anymore. I can just choose them directly from the favorite folders. And how we so remember that advanced filter that we just built? Let's rebuild this, except this time, let's say we want to save it. And this is done pretty easily. So I'm just going to hit new folder, and I'll say unpaid invoices for Alpha Business. There we go. I've added it. And then I add the conditions that I wanted last time. So things like payment status. Once again, I'm going to choose partially paid and unpaid, and of course, account to choose Alpha Business. One of the things I also wanted to mention for you guys is you don't have to talk to your system administrator to kind of set up these dynamic groups and dynamic folders. All of this you can do on your own side without any additional access rights or anything. So whenever you're trying to figure out, well, what's the best method for me to sort my data, make a folder for it. There's no reason not to, and you guys can see for yourselves that it is more or less a pretty painless process. We can also rename folders, change the filters, even restrict who has access to that particular folder. Though I do want to note that that won't change who has access to the records, but who has access to see the folders that you set up for yourself. And of course, we can move or delete them. And before I leave the screen, now let's say I need to prepare a report. And a report specifically on the unpaid invoices of Alpha Business. And I want to present this now to someone. Now, of course, I could hit print screen and copy and paste, but we really do have a much easier way of doing that. we can actually export what you guys see here on our section page into a CSV file that can be opened by any Excel program. And for that, we just hit the action button and export list to file. And that will go ahead and automatically download for us a .csv file with all of the necessary information. Things like the amount, the currency it was paid in, invoice number, date, everything we see on the main Alpha Business or on the main section page. All of this information is immediately available for us. So I hope you guys have at least a little bit of a sense of kind of how easy and painless it really is to use our system and to set it up to work just the way you want them to. Now, I'm going to move on to the next major part of our functionality that people and you will most likely always use and always want to use, which is the calendar. If you guys are anything like me, I have a lot going on in my day, and to be honest, without a way to plan all of my activities out, I'd have no way to survive. But if you're using BPM Online, you don't need to switch over to your Outlook calendar to make sure that you're on track and that you have everything planned out. You can actually use the calendar present directly in the system itself. And we accessed it, obviously, by going to our activity screen. Now, we do have a couple of options in our activity screen that you guys can see from here. Our list view, we can even set up dashboards, but most of the time, we're going to be talking about our calendars. And you guys will notice that the same filtration options we had present in Invoices are also present in our calendar. So things like our date filters, our owner filters, our basic folder and advanced filters, and tags as well. And adding something to your calendar is actually pretty easy. In fact, it's as simple as clicking and dragging and then hitting the new task button. That'll bring up a little mini page with activities that we can then fill out some given information for. So once again, to show you guys, all we gotta have to do is select some period of time, hit the new button, and hit new task. It'll automatically set the start and end dates for us with some kind of activity category and some kind of activity status. We can even connect it to different parts of our system if this is, let's say, an activity that's tied to a specific account or that's tied to a specific project or invoice or opportunity, and we want to see that activity reflected in those records histories. Well, we can just hit the plus button and make sure that it always will be. Additionally, we have a couple of more kind of segmentation options. So you guys can see that to be a default. We have our blocks of time here set in half-an-hour chunks, but maybe you need a bit more finesse than that. And we can just hit the view button and then choose whether we want to see this in hour chunks or in 15-minute chunks or in 5-minute chunks. So you can really plan out your day to the utmost precision that you need it to. Additionally, I did want to mention to you guys, so when I was talking about invoices and I showed you the owner filter, I said that you could add additional people and see their invoices as well. Well, guess what? We can actually see additional people's calendars just the same as we could in our invoices. So if I just hit Add Owner and select a different owner, we can see that Valerie's calendar activities have also shown up right here. This means that you no longer have to go through huge email chains of coordinating with different team members, with different contacts, in order to make sure that everyone is clear on some planned meeting. you can just as easily just add their ownership to the owner filter and then look for a free spot. It's as simple as that. Now I see we have another question. Let me go ahead and answer that. Okay, I see my colleague is going ahead and answering the question that we had. So I'm going to continue. So you guys heard where I just mentioned that you no longer had to have huge email chains in order to plan meetings. Well, you really can start getting rid of the huge email chains entirely with the help of our feed feature. Now, our feed feature can be used to post company-wide messages to everyone in the company that they would be able to see as soon as getting into the site. So if I type, let's say, and publish, everyone in the company news channel will be able to see this message pop up in our feed. It's the social aspect of our software that really helps with cutting down on all of the typical email and inbox clutter that people tend to collect over time. And we can do a lot of the same typical social media stuff. We can comment on various feed posts. We can give them likes if we like. We can edit and delete our own feed posts as well. And of course, that'll leave both a timestamp and the user that posted it. Not only can we just leave messages for the company as a whole, we can directly reference other users with the help of the @ sign. So I started typing here @Valerie, and we see that Valerie's popped up. And I can leave her a quick message that she will also immediately be able to see. We can use this feed not only from the feed section in here, but actually as part of the feeds in our activities. So if I was to go into one of our activities right here, say one of the activities posted for tomorrow, and I wanted to just give Valerie a little update on this activity, I could, of course, set her as the owner of this activity and then put the remind owner tag. That way she would get a notification in her little notification panel here. Or I could also simply leave a message for her on this feed. There we go. And of course, she'll also see this pop up in her feed as well. So with the help of using all of this different feed information, we can really kind of cut down on a lot of the hassle of communication, and especially if you're working in an international office where maybe you don't want to have simply a flood of emails talking about the minutiae of planning things up, asking for various advice, or simply keeping someone updated. We can just use our feed functionality in both the bar at the right-hand side and in our activities. Now, before we go on, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions about the activities or folders, and then we will continue on. Okay, we actually did get a question asking whether the feed can be accessed from any of the records in our sections. And yes, in fact, they can. You can be in leads, you can be in accounts and contacts and opportunities, orders, anywhere in the system, and you can always leave a feed message for whomever you need. Now that we've gotten our activities out of the way, we've gone over our filters, let's look at another core part of our functionality, and that is going to be our email integration. We can access all of our email, of course, from the email panel on the right-hand side. And one, it looks like mail, and two, we do get another handy little tooltip that is called email. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and open my email. And we can see that a bunch of email has already been loaded. But I probably don't have any email mailboxes connected yet. We can check this by clicking on these three dots. If I had an email mailbox set up, it would be set up under here. We can connect to almost any mailbox that presents IMAP and SMTP support. So if you have a corporate Outlook account or a Gmail account for personal use, both of those can be connected, as can almost any other account that you think of, as long as they adhere to IMAP and SMTP standards. And before I show you how to actually synchronize your own email, I wanted to talk about our incoming, outgoing, and drafts, as well as processed as not processed. Incoming, outgoing, and drafts, they serve the same feature that you see in your email client. Emails that are incoming are emails that were mailed to you, emails that are outgoing are emails that you mailed yourself, and you can even have draft emails saved up. Processed and not processed is the same thing as read and unread. Once you're done with an email, you can just mark it as processed, and it'll be removed from the not processed screen. You no longer have to think about it unless you need to retrieve it for some historic reasons. One of the things I also wanted to mention is a really curious functionality of our system that I think people just love, which is the fact that our emails can automatically be tied to certain contacts and accounts. What this means is if you get an email from someone who is already a contact in the system, and their email is a detail is added to that contact record, the system will automatically match the email that you got the email from with the contact, and it'll show up exactly like this. We can also manually attach emails to, let's say, activities, to processes or projects, to accounts, the same as the system does automatically. For example, here we can see that we've got an email that's been connected not only to a contact, but to an account, to a contract, and to an opportunity, and we can go ahead and add it to an activity. And we can add all these things by hitting the little flag button and then choosing what we want to connect our emails to. If we want to get rid of an email, we can just hit the delete button. Though I do want to warn you that deleting an email from inside BPM Online will not delete it from your actual outside mailbox. It simply will delete it from BPM Online and will not resynchronize if you then synchronize your system later. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at how to connect a Gmail mailbox to our BPM Online system. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on these three little buttons, and we have a nice little option called New Email Account. And it'll let me select a mail service. We can, of course, add a new server if, for some reason, we have a corporate email, or maybe we're just using an email provider we don't automatically set up. In that case, I would usually recommend you go to your CRM coordinator or your system administrator to add that new server. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and add my own Gmail account. And of course, it'll ask me for a couple of things. The email address, in this case, john.best@bpm1@gmail.com. After which I put in both my password, my username, and my password. And I hit sign in. As we can see that the system asks me whether I want to add this email to the contact communication detail. If you do, that means all of these emails will be associated with me. And it'll also give me a notification that all of my user account information was added correctly. And I can go ahead and modify some of these settings. I'll just give you a quick look so you guys can see what you need for yourself. Our settings are pretty simple. Things like, do I want to use this mailbox to send emails? Do I want to use it by default if I have multiple mailboxes connected to a single account? And yes, you can have multiple email mailboxes connected to a single account in BPM Online. I can make it shared if I needed to, and I can turn on or off email receiving, whether I want to receive emails on this account. And I can also control whether I want these emails to be downloaded automatically, the synchronization period that I want them to see, and whether I want to download them from all the folders in my mailbox or just important ones or customized ones. And all of which is controlled from my email settings. By hitting save, it'll save all of those choices. So having my email connected is a pretty great thing. If I have automatically download, then typically it'll automatically download every so often, or I can manually synchronize by hitting the synchronize button. And after a few minutes, while the system processes all of these emails, they will start appearing in my not processed section of my email panel. Now, email isn't the only communication option we've got present in the system. We can also connect with telephony. And by connecting with our telephony settings, we can actually make calls not only to other users of the system, but outside of the system as well. And let's take a look at exactly how we can do that. So as you guys can see, we do have this handy little phone button. It says calls on the right hand side of our screen. I'm just going to click that, and it just says, whom do you want to call? Now, I can get numbers from here a couple of ways. I can actually go into contacts, and if I have their phone numbers already out for me on this page, I can just click those numbers immediately. Of course, I have to allow it to use my microphone, but it'll go ahead and start ringing for me. I can also connect to other users in the system. So if I wanted to call, for example, John Best, I can actually call his extension directly, and it'll go ahead and ring. And I don't only have to call from those two options. I can actually call from quite a few. I can go into a record and hit the green call button, and it'll go ahead and call that for me. I can also even call it from, again, our activity section, which is really handy when you're scheduling a phone call. Maybe you do want to use your calendar to schedule phone calls. And why just schedule it and put it back when you can just go ahead and make that call immediately? So I'm going to switch back to my activities, and let's go ahead and open up one of these activities. And let's say we wanted to make a phone call. So I can actually add a call task. by hitting the call button, of course, and then put in some general information. I can say it's not started. I can, again, set all the reminders that I need to. I can look at my call details and so on, and I can just hit save. Okay, so let's add, so obviously it says call John about the invoice. So I probably want to connect this opportunity to John. So it shows up on both my history and his. And we can see that the account was already filled in. I could, of course, connect it to whatever invoice I'm mentioning here in this particular call. And I can go ahead and hit save. Now, if I hover over the activity, if I go ahead and hover over the activity, I'll get a little pop-up that'll let me call him directly. So if I have my activity open and I go ahead and hover over the contact, not only will it pop up with the little mini card showing me a bunch of information about John Best. You know, I have his title, where he works, who owns it. I can send him an email from here, or I can hit the little green button and select which number I want to call from. So I have my calls, I've got my activity here. Why schedule it when I can just call them immediately? And it as simple as that. So now that we've gone through most of the base functionality that you as an end user will want to be using, let's hit the last part, and that is going to be our dashboards. So you can now add activities, you can call people, you can send emails, you can read your emails, you can filter through all the data you need to, and you're getting pretty used to the system. Now you want to take a look at some of our analytics. Now you want to dig into the data you have and maybe start planning for the future, start tracking your performances, start tracking KPIs. And for that, we have a bunch of preset dashboards. As you guys saw when I was clicking through some of the sections, almost all of our sections have dashboards for them. And we also have a general dashboard section that's also present in our products. You guys can see right here that I have a bunch of kind of default dashboards already set up in this demo version. Things like general indicators, half-year analytics, things like KPIs, so on and so forth, that let me see all of these different analytics immediately. Now, one of the analytics that I really want to show you is not only just generally the dashboards we have set up and the data you can see, but how you can kind of dig into the data in these dashboards in order to get to the core that you want. So let's take a look at some of our half-year analytics. And we're going to do something like drilling down. That's what we call it. Drilling down, of course, lets us see exactly the data present in a given section. So if I'm going to go ahead and take a look at leads, for example, and I see I've got 57 leads here now in the qualification stage, and I want to see exactly which leads they are. I can click on the section I want to drill down onto, and it'll give me a bunch of choices. I can go ahead and drill down into a pie chart. I can drill down into another pipeline. I can drill down into columns. And of course, sort by, let's say, accounts, and I can see for every account how many leads they have. And I can even drill down further and see what leads are present for the accounts. Or I can hit display data, and it'll give me a list of exactly the records that correspond to the data I'm looking at from our analytics. We can, of course, change these dashboards. If you wanted to make some custom dashboards, we can just hit the Actions button, and we can hit Edit or New. We can take a screenshot of all our dashboards if we needed to. We can copy or delete them. We can give them some access rights. And I'm not going to go too deeply into all the intricacies of setting up dashboards, but I would like to kind of show you guys a basic dashboard that you might want to set up for yourself. And we've got a bunch of choices here: charts, indicators, speedometers, lists, widgets, web pages, or a sales pipeline. A chart is, like you guys would imagine, a chart of some kind, a pie graph or a column chart or a line chart. An indicator is just a specific count of some amount of records. A speedometer shows you how fast you're going in terms of maybe hitting a certain goal. We can add all these, of course, by just hitting the plus sign. And we can see that it'll take us to our process designer. And all of these dashboard designers are different, but not entirely. They all share a more or less single unifying factor. And that's something that we've already talked about, our filters. Because, of course, when you're setting up a dashboard, you need to filter through some given information and not just take a look at everything that you have. And by hitting and creating a new dashboard, we can use, for example, the same exact filters that we've used in our folders, in our advanced filters, to have a nice graphical representation of the data that these folders store. So before I go on, I would like to see if anyone had any additional questions on dashboards, or if they'd like to find out anything else. Well, that seems to be it. Thank you guys for listening. I will be providing you a link to the recorded video by the end of the week, so stay tuned. If you'd missed anything or you got here late and you want to catch up on maybe some of the stuff we covered in today's webinar, you're more than welcome to check out the link that I'll be providing you once we have that done. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day.